Traditionally, people will say that only gasoline or diesel-powered vehicles, internal combustion engine-equipped vehicles, these are the only ones that can give you sheer driving pleasure. But this car right beside me is a fully electric vehicle that can still give you sheer driving pleasure. This is the 2024 BMW i4 M50. And in this video, I'll show you just how fun this car is to drive, how comfortable it is, and how it can still truly be the ultimate driving machine. So what exactly is the BMW i4 M50? Well, you take the BMW 4 Series, for example, what we have here in the Philippines, the 420i, and you turn it completely electric. That's essentially what this is. But since this particular car we have right here beside us is the i4 M50, well, it's the high-performance version of the i4. And in line with its high-performance nature, it also has to look high-performance. And that's why BMW gave this a lot of M body kits. Starting off here at the front, you can see that almost everything is blacked out. You have a nicer, sportier bumper. Of course, you still do get LED headlamps as is standard. And if you look over here at the side, while you still get 19-inch rims, just like its cheaper alternative, the BMW i4 eDrive 35, you get them staggered now. So over here at the front, you have 245 1419s. Over there at the rear, 255 1419s. You'll also notice that this car does come with these blue painted calipers, these M calipers, and they brake pretty well too. Now, since this is again an M car, you'll be seeing an M badge over here. And if usually BMW electric vehicles have a lot of blue accents on it, this one gets them in black to make them a little bit sportier. It also gets the M-styled wing mirrors right here, which look pretty nice, very aerodynamic looking. And it also has what they call the M shadow line, which is essentially they've removed any sort of chrome from the window sills and now they are all painted black. Now, what's pretty interesting about this M52 is that it comes with the M adaptive suspension. So you can configure between a softer suspension setup for your day-to-day drives, but when you want to have a little bit more fun, just put it in sport mode and it will tighten up and give you better handling too. Now, moving on towards the rear, what really makes this car special, aside from, again, the kits such as your M bumpers, your M badge over there, is compared to the i4 eDrive 35, you get an additional tiny spoiler here at the back. But just like the BMW 4 Series, this is its special trick. It may look like a sedan or a coupe, but this is actually a liftback. And look at that, the space that you get here at the back is pretty impressive. It truly is pretty big. You can even fold down those rear seats 40, 20, 40. And if you look under this false floor, there is even a subwoofer. So the audio system in this one, a Harman Kardon audio system, sounds pretty good too. So as usual, even though it's an electric vehicle, for tradition's sake, we'll talk about the powertrain with the hood open. So under the hood, what you have here is a dual motor setup. This car has all-wheel drive. It uses an 83.9 kilowatt-hour battery, which truly isn't bad. Now, what is the power? Is it impressive? Of course it is. It makes 544 horsepower and 795 Newton meters of torque. It can catapult itself from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in only 3.9 seconds, despite weighing 2.2 tons. And for your top speed, you can go up to about 225 kilometers per hour. So that is proper impressive. Now, what about range though? Now, BMW Philippines claims about 520 kilometers of range. And yes, that is about true. In my tests, you can return around 503 kilometers in a single charge. But this is if there is almost no traffic or if you're only doing long distance highway driving. But if you drive this inside Metro Manila on a daily basis with a really bad traffic, you're more realistically gonna return only around 352 kilometers on a single charge. Now, before we close these doors up, I want you to take a look at the windows here at the side, because BMW is actually marketing this as like a four-door coupe, right? So you have frameless windows over here, and don't worry, they will automatically raise up and seal once you close the doors. But now, speaking of that, let's now close the door and check the door thud. And yeah, that sounds excellent because it is a European car after all. Now to start it up, And of course, you barely hear anything except for those really nice sounds that BMW give you. Now, inside here, you have a very premium feeling interior. You can hit, you can shake, you can tug on every single piece here, and they will all feel pretty solid, including this like screen by the center, which by the way is a dual screen setup, 12.3 inches big for the digital instrument cluster and 14.9 inches big for your center touchscreen, which also comes with wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and a reverse camera. Unfortunately, oddly, it doesn't even come with a 360-degree view camera. Now, moving on to the other things in here, you have a lot of premium feeling soft touch materials from your dashboard, from your doors, and even the leather on your seats, and even the leather that you find here by the center armrest. They all feel very premium and supple too. Being an M car, you do have these nice, like pretty aggressive bucket seats, and you can even adjust the bolsterings on it, at least for the driver's side. And for the driver's side too, you get 2 setting memory functions. The steering wheel is also an M steering wheel, so it is proper thick with nice blue and red accents on it, and it is also adjustable, and it goes pretty far back too. So finding your perfect driving position for when you want to go extremely fast in this is pretty easy to do. Now let's move on over here to the center, and it has a very minimalist design. You have a wireless charging pad here by the front, you have 2 cup holders, you have a very tiny shifter by the center, but don't worry, it is pretty easy to use. Got a couple of driving modes too. You have your Eco Pro mode, your Comfort mode, your Sport mode, your Sport Boost mode, and all that, so you can really tailor this to your liking. Now, for the things I'm not a big fan of with this interior, well, it now uses BMW iDrive 8.5, their latest operating system. So you practically lost out on all buttons in here. So if you want to change your climate settings, for example, you want to increase your fan speed, you do have to go into the infotainment screen, which can get pretty annoying. But if anything, BMW at least did still give us a volume knob and a next track and previous track knob, but that is pretty much it. Now, since this is a 4-door coupe, it of course has back seats too, right? But before we talk about that, let's check the door thud first here at the back. That also sounds excellent. So, when you're back here, space is not exactly great, because while you do have some leg room, it's not the best in the world, and I am seated behind my own driving position. I am only 5'6" tall, and yeah, I only have around, what, 4 inches of legroom or so. So if you are about 5'8", seated behind yourself, well, space wouldn't be great here already. And also, if you look at headroom, it's not the tallest either. So if, again, you're about 5'8", 5'9", maybe 5'10" at most, yeah, not exactly the best place to sit in for longer journeys. Also, if you look at the footwell, that also isn't great, because the front seats, they are pretty low, so you don't really have that much space to stick your feet under and stretch out, unless the driver raises his seat all the way up, which they would rarely do in a performance car. Now, would they? So for your toys, you still do get a couple of them though. You still do get your own air vents with your own climate control settings here at the back. You get 2 USB-C ports. You do still get the center armrest with 2 cup holders, and the only saving grace I have for this vehicle is that it does get a quarter panel here, which really does add in a little bit more light inside the cabin, making it less claustrophobic. However, BMW did not give us a sunroof, not even a tiny one, which is a little bit of a bummer considering the price of this vehicle. So now we drive the BMW i4 M50, and driving this is obviously a lot of fun because you have a 0 to 100 time of 3.9 seconds. And do you feel every single bit of that? Well, let me demonstrate a little bit of it. We're not gonna go all the way to about 100 right here, because the speed limit here, well, it's not really the highest, but let me just show you from a standstill in 3, 2, 1, and go. Yep, the all-wheel drive motor really helps out a lot in putting all that traction to the ground. And even earlier, it was raining a lot, you don't really feel a lot of slip here. So yes, that is probably one of the biggest advantage of this i4 M50 over its younger, more affordable sibling, the i4 eDrive 35. It is that dual motor all-wheel drive system. Now, don't think that the i4 is only great at accelerations. I mean, sure, yes, it's an electric vehicle and a lot of people look for that acceleration, but it also handles pretty well. Leave it in comfort mode and it handles pretty decently. Put it in the sport modes, which tightens up those shocks right there, and it handles really well. Like, it's pretty flat around corners. Plus, you couple that again with that all-wheel drive motor, and your handling is superb Even though this car weighs over 2.2 tons, you barely feel the weight of this. And since the batteries are located under the floors, your center of gravity is pretty low, it makes for a very engaging driving experience. Now, what isn't very engaging though is the steering feel. Yes, I've always complimented BMW's electric steering systems, and yes, this is no exception. It is pretty good insofar as electric power steering systems are concerned. However, you still cannot fight, or you still cannot beat the older hydraulic systems that BMW uses in terms of feedback. Yes, this is precise. It goes exactly where you want it to go, but it just doesn't give you enough feel of where the front wheels are. Next, I want to talk about the suspension overall in terms of comfort, right? And leave it in comfort mode and you will totally forget that this is a performance vehicle. It truly is pretty comfortable. It's a lot more comfortable compared to the BMW 318i Business, for example. You can largely thank the adaptive suspension for that, because when BMW uses these adaptive suspensions, they tune it really well. If they use the non-adaptive suspensions, they tend to be a little bit too firm for Philippine roads. But if you put this into sport mode, again, it tightens it up, it kind of destroys the ride a little bit. It still isn't too bad, honestly, but yeah, for your day-to-day trips, just leave it in comfort mode. You want to push it over the corner, that's the only time you put it into sport mode. Next, I want to talk about the throttle and brakes. In a lot of electric vehicles, the throttle's a little bit too sensitive, so you can't really modulate it even if you put the cars into eco mode. But for this one, even if you put it in sport mode, there just is a way to modulate your foot in such a way that it won't be a jerky experience. And this is something true that I've seen in a lot of BMW EVs. So far, it's only BMW cars that I've been able to try that can do this very smoothly. Next would be the brakes. The brakes are also in typical Euro BMW fashion. They're also pretty easy to modulate. They're pretty smooth. But again, the problem with this is, since we are using the iDrive 8.5 system now, you don't have paddle shifters to control your regenerative braking. So if you want to increase it or decrease it, you do have to go into your infotainment system, which could get pretty annoying and pretty distracting too. But no matter, if you really want super hard regenerative braking, simply put this car into the B mode with the hit of the switch, and you are now in one of the highest, if not the highest, mode for regenerative braking. Being an electric vehicle, you're also probably concerned about how quiet or how loud it is. And yes, it is super quiet because you don't have any of the powertrain noises. But you might also find it a little bit too quiet at times. But not to worry, because BMW placed their iconic sounds in here, designed by Hans Zimmer himself, who made scores for Game of Thrones and The Lion King, which, if you put this car into sport mode, listen to that sound it makes. I wouldn't say it's exhilarating, but it feels very premium. It feels very refined, which truly sums up the entire driving experience of this BMW i4 M50. It's not only fast, but it's also pretty refined and very premium feeling as well. But what isn't very premium feeling is, again, in typical BMW Philippines fashion, you don't really have too much advanced driver assistance systems with this car. I would expect that from the cheaper models of the BMW Philippines lineup, not from a car that costs about 6 million pesos. But in case you're wondering what this has, well, it only has like autonomous emergency braking. Yay, at least it has that. It has lane departure warning, but it doesn't get lane keep assist, traffic jam assistance, nor adaptive cruise control. Is that even valid in this price range now? Maybe not. Pretty annoying, BMW. Come on, give us more. We'd be willing to pay a little bit more for those. Again, no car is perfect, so we do have to move on to yet another negative thing about the i4 M50, and that is the turning radius. I have no idea why, but the turning radius of this vehicle is pretty large. One of the cars I've hated the most when it comes to turning radii would be the FJ Cruiser, and this is about as wide in turns as an FJ Cruiser. Lock to lock, the front wheels barely want to go anywhere. Does that have anything to do with the all-wheel drive version of this? Not too sure. I have driven the i4 eDrive 35, but I didn't really test out its turning radius, so not too sure about that. Maybe one day when we get to drive that car again, we can finally test out its turning radius. Now, despite all that I have said, you might be thinking that the BMW i4 is just a car to have fun in, but no, because when you go on the highway, again, in typical European car BMW fashion, it still is a very smooth vehicle. It's a very relaxing vehicle. The seats are super ergonomic. Your back, your body won't hurt. And if you want to go on long distance drives with this vehicle, definitely go ahead. As long as you find a charging station on your route going there, because if you drive the i4, especially with how much power it has, which again, you can demonstrate right here, you will end up spending a lot of your battery and your range on those occasional pulls. In fact, I've tried doing a couple of high-speed pulls, and I've noticed that I drop about 1% of my battery life for every pull that I do, which it's totally normal for an electric vehicle, but yeah, it just is a fact that we have to live with these electric vehicles. So the BMW i4, it truly still is an ultimate driving machine that will give you sheer driving pleasure despite being a fully electric vehicle. I mean, can you really say no to 544 horsepower and 795 Newton meters of torque and a range of about 503 kilometers and a top speed of 225 kilometers per hour and a 0 to 100 time of 3.9 seconds? I don't think so. But how much does this car cost? Well, you can get this now for 5,990,000 pesos. And sure, it may not be the most fully equipped car out there. In usual BMW Philippines fashion, the ADAS system is not complete. You don't get a sunroof. But if you're only looking for that ultimate driving machine while also being somehow good for the environment, then the BMW i4 M50 might just be the perfect ultimate driving machine for you.